Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with End Time Ministries, and I thank you for joining me for Tuesday's edition of End of the Age. Now, I'm going to be talking about gun control today. And I know that our hearts are sickened by what happened in Las Vegas on Sunday night. What a travesty. I mean, we've prayed for these the families of these individuals in our morning prayer and devotions here, and we've talked about them, and I ask God to bring them peace that passes all understanding and to comfort them like only He can because of this unbelievable catastrophe that has happened. But I'm not really amazed, but I'm kind of shocked that people would try to politicize something like this and to try to get their agenda across because of something like this. And so I've done programs on gun control before, but I'm going to do it again today because I think we need to go back to really what's going on here when people call for gun control in a situation like this. Because you can only imagine that if all of our guns were taken away, all of the citizens' guns were taken away, the law-abiding citizens, imagine what would happen at that point. People could walk in and pretty much do whatever they wanted, anywhere they wanted, a criminal or somebody with a deviant mind. And so we really need to talk about this because there are people calling for gun control and a lot of different things, and it's just a mess. And so I wanted to do another program today on gun control just to kind of bring everybody's mind back in alignment with what's really going on. Because just because you hear something in the news doesn't mean that's actually the way things are. I think we all kind of realize that now, but let's talk about it. Let's talk about the cry for gun control in the aftermath. So, in the aftermath, you've seen it all over the news of the Las Vegas mass shooting. Many people are lobbying for stricter gun control in America. And I knew that they would. I mentioned it yesterday on the program. I mean, you knew it was coming because they have an agenda that they're pushing. However, believe it or not, guns by themselves had nothing to do with the Las Vegas tragedy that occurred Sunday night. The guns themselves didn't pick themselves up and go over to the window and start shooting. Somebody had to pick the guns up with an ulterior motive on their mind to go do that. So what's the ulterior motive really as a result of this incident driving the call for more gun control in America? What's the call? What's really driving this call for gun control, gun control, gun control? Because guns don't kill people in and of themselves. It's people that wield guns that go kill people. Deranged people, criminals, different things like that. The gun will lay there on a shelf for 100 years if nobody grabs it. But it takes an individual with a certain belief system. Talked about it yesterday. So what's really driving this? Well, there is an agenda to control the guns in and around the world, not just in America, but the people that believe in a world government and different things, they are on board with this. Why control the weapons of civilians? Because it's absolute control with no means of resistance. At the end of the day, that's what it all boils down to. Think about these tyrannical individuals that have lived over the years that took the guns away from their citizens. They wanted to be able to control them and for them to have no means of resistance. I mean, let's boil it all down to its essence. So, on today's program, let's talk about gun control. As a result of what happened Sunday night in Las Vegas, Jimmy Kimmel said, "We'll pray for Las Vegas. Bills will be written. They'll be watered down and they'll fail. The NRA will smother it all with money, and over time, we'll get distracted and we'll move on to the next thing, and then it will happen again and again." He made a plea for more gun control. Hillary Clinton tweeted that our grief isn't enough. We can and must put politics aside, stand up to the NRA. They brought the NRA into this and work together to try to stop this from happening again. And then CNS News reports that Nancy Pelosi calls for the creation of a special congressional committee on gun control in the immediate wake of Sunday night's mass shooting, of course, that happened in Las Vegas. And many of you know that 58 people were murdered and just over 500 were injured. Well, as a result, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi sent a letter to House Speaker Paul Ryan saying that Congress has a moral duty to address what she called an epidemic of gun violence. All of these individuals and many others, the news is full of people that are calling for more gun control as a result of what happened Sunday night. But on the other hand of that, you have Republican Representative Steve Scalise, who, if you remember, at a practice for a ball game that was coming up months and months ago, his hip was shattered by gunfire, and it was this summer. He told Norah O'Donnell last week in an interview for 60 Minutes that his views on gun rights have not changed. O'Donnell asked him, "You're now a victim of gun violence." And Scalise said, "Yeah, but I was also saved by a well-trained person who had guns, and they were able to shoot back. And whatever the weapons are going to be, whether it's," he says, "I mean, if it's not a gun, it'll be a hand grenade or it'll be a knife or an axe." So it's irrelevant that it's a gun. It could be any kind of a weapon. But he said, I think what's important to focus on is that we have strong rights in this country, and we're protected by them. In other words, the ability to own a gun and to protect yourself. Steve Scalise was shot on a ball field, and there were gunmen there to protect him that shot back at the individual and ended up killing him. Had they not had guns, probably all of them would have been slaughtered. So when you see something like this and you look at these politicians, movie stars, and all these other people that are saying, "Oh, we need more gun control," folks, there's an agenda behind that. Because a law-abiding citizen with a normal mind would never go out and just kill 50 people. It just doesn't happen. There's something going on in the mind of that individual that would allow them to go do that. You say, well, if we took everybody's guns away, it wouldn't work. No, if you took everybody's guns away, every thief that wanted to could come into everybody's house and take whatever they wanted, and there's nothing you could do about it. You talk about crime going up. I mean, look at it like this. Chicago, they had over 4,000 victims of gun-related crimes in 2016. And they have the strictest gun laws in the country. So gun control certainly hasn't helped there. Just by taking everybody's guns away doesn't mean gun violence is going to go away. So The call for gun control by liberal politicians, it's not about ending gun violence. It takes a spiritual change in society really to do that. No, it's much deeper than that. So let's talk about it. What's the real agenda going on here? And obviously, I would love to see this violence go away. But taking everybody's guns, that's not going to happen. These deranged individuals could get a gun on the black market if they really wanted to go do something like this. If you take everybody else's guns away, then it's open range. They could do anything they wanted to. But there's an agenda here. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about really controlling the world. Let's step outside of America for a minute. Let's talk about controlling the world through gun control, because I promise you there are efforts to do that. Now, listen to this quote very closely. When governments fear people, there's liberty. When the people fear the government, there is tyranny. So the strongest reason for the people to retain the right to keep and bear arms is, as a last resort, to protect themselves against tyranny in government. Thomas Jefferson said that. So it goes way above just necessarily protecting yourself from a thief who would want to enter your home. That's one thing. To have protection in your home, to protect yourself and your family. But more than that, people who would want to rule this nation or even the world, they understand that if you want a true world government, you have to take away people's means of resistance to your tyrannical rule. Leaders of nations have known that forever. And so Thomas Jefferson said, and many of the leaders of our forefathers understood that people need a right to protect themselves. So let me give you a little history behind what was going through their mind when they formed this country originally, because we can't get away from that. If we get away from that, then this will cease really, this and many other principles, I understand, but these guys had just come out from under the rule of King George, and they understood not having a means of resistance. So, after years of, what I'm going to do is bring you through some history, then I'll bring you back to today. So just stick with me here. After years of slavery, our forefathers defected from England with dreams of a land that would be governed by people, not a tyrannical king. In an effort to guarantee more freedom and less control, they signed the Constitution of the United States, which limited governmental control of the people. The Constitution doesn't tell the government what all it can do. It limits the control of government. To further restrict any ability to establish a strong central government, the U.S. House of Representatives devoted the first 10 amendments, or the Bill of Rights, of the Constitution to the protection of individual liberties. Of these, the Second Amendment gives every United States citizen the right to keep and bear arms, not with the intent of providing weapons to hunt rabbits and this, that, and the other, or just to go shoot clay pigeons. That's not what guns, the only reason that we own guns, but as a means of defense. Now, remember, I'm talking about our forefathers here. They designed it as a means of defense against a tyrannical government that might seek to enslave individuals and to strip them of their God-given rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So, the Second Amendment states this: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. shall not be infringed. Now, some say that this is not an individual right, but merely gives each state government the power to maintain a military force. And the reason for the debate is simple. All men are endowed by our Creator, not government, with certain unalienable rights. Government doesn't give us our rights. Those come from God, our Creator. One of those rights is the ability to keep and protect our freedom. Consequently, any government or dictator seeking to strip United States citizens of those freedoms and to control the people must intentionally misinterpret the Second Amendment and take away the citizens' ability to resist them, and hence gun control laws. So I'm kind of giving you the agenda behind what these people are calling for as a result of this horrific event that happened Sunday night. So isn't it clear why our forefathers signed the Second Amendment into law? They knew exactly what it was like to live in slavery under a dictator who disarmed the masses and left no means of resistance. They had just come out from under that. The critical question today then is this: if the only reason for disarmament is to control the masses, then why is there presently such a push for gun control, or there has been over the last several years, in the United States and around the world? Because it's all about control, control, control. It's not necessarily about their protection. Imagine if I live here in Dallas, okay. I live in one of the north cities of Dallas. Imagine if they made a decree that every citizen in Dallas and the surrounding area has to turn in their guns, okay? Well, it's going to be law-abiding citizens that they think would do that. I think there are some that probably wouldn't. Obviously, this is Texas, but everybody goes and turns their guns in. Okay, now, let's say you're a criminal and you want to go out and do armed robberies. It's open range, folks. But no, people realized hundreds of years ago, this country, these people need to be able to protect themselves, their family, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I need to be able to protect my life and my family's life. But there are people that would like to be able to take that away. It's called gun control. So let me jump back in history again to our forefathers. They went from armed citizens originally to slaves. For over 1,000 years, it had been customary for an Englishman to serve in a citizen's army or a militia, which originally required every individual to be armed and to defend the realm if needed. This system of universal armament was successful, is very successful for two reasons. Number one, each citizen had a way to defend himself and to protect his individual liberties. He had freedoms at that point. But two, the monarchical rule was kept in check by sheer physical force should a tyrannical government try to enslave the population. Well, during the Stuart period in 1603 to 1714, there was civil war between the kings and the parliaments, which resulted in each side vying for control of the militia. Consequently, this led to the disarmament of many of the English citizens because both sought to confiscate the arms of the opposing faction. So in the end, Parliament forces prevailed and the citizen soldiers of England were turned into the new model army in 1645. However, Parliament misjudged the loyalty of the army to the people of England. This, coupled with no Parliament paycheck and an attack on their religious freedoms, led to the Rump Parliament, where the army actually took over the government under the leadership of Oliver Cromwell. But then Cromwell died in 1659, and the Parliament was reinstated by General George Monk in 1660. The new Parliament, which was made up of those that really favored the monarchy, placed Charles II on the throne. Charles disbanded the army except for those that were loyal to the crown. Immediately, Charles began to disarm any person who was judged dangerous to his empire. Now, remember, why the call for disarmament? It's absolute control with no means of resistance. Now, this left the standing armies in the power of the king to protect his kingdom, and without the system of universal armament, it ended the ability of English citizens to defend their individual liberties, and it forced them into slavery. Now, what was the original intent? Let's talk about that. And then I'm going to bring you right back up to today. After defecting from England because of the tyrannical rule of King George, our forefathers sought to build a new country that was governed by the people. You understand their mindset. They had just been disarmed, made slaves, and so they broke away from that and said, no, we're not going to be ruled by a government anymore. We're going to let the people rule. And these were educated men. And they knew that over the time, there would be those that would try to usurp authority over free American citizens. They understood that very well because they had just come out from under the tyrannical rule of King George. Well, in order to declare our freedom from oppression and provide a safeguard against a tyrannical government ever enforcing its will upon free people, the original founders wrote the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. These documents clearly define the mindset of our forefathers in the late 18th century. The opening statements of the Declaration of Independence provide a distinct remedy for the infectious disease of a tyrannical government, which would seek to deprive free men of their God-given rights to, again, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Declaration of Independence states that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, so that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, that it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new, and it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such governments and to provide new guards for their future security. Now, in an effort to further restrict government encroachment upon the people, the Constitution of the United States was signed into law in 1787, and even though some people don't believe this, it remains the supreme law of the land. In essence, it tells the government what it can and cannot do. In order to avoid a dictatorship or a tyrannical government, the original framers built a system of checks and balances into the government by dividing it into three parts: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial branches, and it thus limiting the ability of any one political entity from retaining all the power. Now, regardless of which state each framer was representing, one main determination propelled them all. I'll boil it all down to its common denominator. No dictatorship shall ever run the United States of America, period. They were going to make absolutely 100% sure of that. So after the Constitution was adopted, several state representatives determined that the wording of the Constitution was vague concerning individual liberties. As a result, James Madison wrote the first 10 amendments to the Constitution known as the Bill of Rights. These 10 amendments are a very specific list of restrictions placed on the federal government, further protecting the individual rights of each United States citizen and cannot be usurped under any circumstance. In forging these documents, history tells us that even though our founding fathers did not always see eye to eye, there are two things that all of them agreed upon. Number one, a central government or dictator should never be allowed to usurp authority over the people. And two, universal armament, not disarmament, but armament is the only check against a tyrannical government. Consequently, the first point is addressed in the Constitution, while protection for the second is clearly stated in the Second Amendment. So, quickly, let's go through the Second Amendment again and let's discuss it real quick, because this affects you and me and our ability, our right to keep and bear arms. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, of the Bill of Rights, the Second Amendment is the most debated today. And let's jump all the way to 2017 now. Some have said that it gives the state the right to control any militia and that only those individuals should be armed. Others say because of the Game Act law passed by the English in 1671, which restricted hunting of those of wealth to those of wealth, that the Second Amendment only allows citizens a weapon capable of hunting. But this is simply not the case. So do you get back in the mind of our forefathers and understand really what the Second Amendment was all about? It's very important that we understand that, because there are people today that would like to say, we need more gun control. We need to take guns away from individuals. They'll say they don't want that, but that's absolutely where they're headed.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter, the new book by Irvin's grandson, provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your connection to God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at End Time will help you identify areas in your life where you can be more intentional and ultimately discover your purpose. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real-life change. Pre-order for only $25.99 at endtime.com/move and get free bonus items worth over $100. Go to endtime.com/move today.
Have you signed up for your trip of a lifetime? Prophecy will come to life as you walk through Israel with Irvin Baxter. Space is limited. Our extended deadline to sign up is October 5th. Call 1-800-END-TIME, that's 1-800-363-8463, or go to endtime.com to experience Israel as never before. Don't miss this amazing tour. Our deadline is quickly approaching. Sign up today.
You can now become a magazine subscriber for life. You will receive first-class benefits that will include a lifetime membership to End Time Magazine, as well as an unlimited access to the digital version of the magazine. You will also receive 20% off of all future orders at endtime.com. Join today by calling 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or go to endtime.com.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archives button.
So now you kind of get the mindset of what was going through our forefathers, and they knew that there needed to be a special provision to arm the people, the population, because they understand how important it was. Because without being armed, there's absolutely no means of resistance to a tyrannical government. And so throughout time, there have been efforts to disarm America through different laws and different things that passed. people have called for more gun control, more gun control, more gun control. And now you see that. I knew when I first heard this early Monday morning about the mass shooting that happened in Las Vegas, I thought, here we go. There's going to be a whole new round of people pushing for gun control, gun control, gun control. And it always comes from the politicians and it comes from Hollywood. People that they're in each other's back pockets. And they're calling for gun control. It's not, do they understand really what's going on? It's not the guns, everyone. If not a gun, it could be a car, or like Steve Scalise said, it could be a grenade or a knife or anything. If it's a deranged individual that picks up the weapon is irrelevant. And they say, well, hey, you know, you can just take out more people with a gun than you can a knife. A bus running through a crowd of people could have taken out a lot more than 58 people the other night. Think about that. There were 22,000 people standing down there at a concert. So, I mean, it's irrelevant the weapon that's used, but there's something about gun control that's always at the forefront. And you can see it happening right now. So let's bring it all the way to just recently. Just look at the issue of gun control in the recent presidential election. Trump was pro-gun. He actually stated that the Second Amendment to our Constitution is clear as a bell. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed upon. Period. He said the Second Amendment guarantees a fundamental right that belongs to all law-abiding citizens. The Constitution doesn't create that right. It ensures that the government can't take it away. Our founding forefathers knew, and our Supreme Court has upheld, that the Second Amendment's purpose is to guarantee our right to defend ourselves and our families. This is about self-defense, plain and simple. Now, it's been said that the Second Amendment is America's first freedom. That's because the right to keep and bear arms protects all of our other rights. We are the only country in the world that has a Second Amendment. That was stated by Trump out on the campaign trail before he became president. And these are some of the things that we reported on, because the two candidates were so diametrically opposed to each other on just about every single issue. Well, Trump was pro-gun. Hillary Clinton was absolutely anti-gun. George Stephanopoulos asked her, he said, do you believe that an individual's right to keep and bear arms is a constitutional right? That it's not linked to service in a militia? Hillary Clinton replied, I think that for most of our history, there was a nuanced reading of the Second Amendment until the decision by the late Justice Antonin Scalia. And there was no argument until then that later localities and states and the federal government had a right, as we do with every amendment, now think about this, to impose reasonable regulations on those rights. So, I believe we can have common sense gun safety measures consistent with the Second Amendment, but I'm only going to speak out for comprehensive background checks, closing the gun show loophole, closing the online loophole, closing the so-called Charleston loophole, reversing the bill that Senator Bernie Sanders voted for and I voted against. Now remember, she's on the campaign trail, obviously. Giving immunity from liability to gun makers and sellers. I think all of that can and should be done, and it is my view, Hillary Clinton's view, consistent with the Constitution. She stated, when it comes to guns, we just have too many guns. On the streets, in our homes, in our neighborhoods, we've got too many guns. She says, I'm not here to make promises I can't keep. I'm here to tell you I will use every single minute of every day, if I am so fortunate enough to be your president, looking for ways that we can save lives, that we can change the gun culture. It is just too easy for people to reach for a gun to settle their problems. It makes no sense. She also said, I was proud when my husband, Bill Clinton, took on the National Rifle Association and were able to ban assault weapons, but he had to put a sunset on. So 10 years later, of course, President George W. Bush wouldn't agree to reinstate them. We've got to go after this. And here again, the Supreme Court is wrong on the Second Amendment. Now, she actually stated the Supreme Court is wrong on the Second Amendment, and I am going to make that case every chance I get. I don't know enough details to tell you how we would do it or how it would work, but certainly the Australia example is worth looking at. Clinton said this at the New Hampshire Town Hall. Well, the Australian program that she was talking about reduced the number of firearms in circulation by implementing a gun buyback plan for the citizens of Australia. So, Donald Trump was diametrically opposed to her. He was pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment. She was anti-gun. So, imagine having her as the president now, where we would be. She was all about this. And so you say, wow. I mean, and so what I'm telling you about today is gun control, the ulterior motive behind the people calling for gun control. Because you're not protecting people's freedom by taking their guns away. That's not what's happening. You're not protecting their life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If you take all the guns out of an individual's home, you leave them helpless to be able to resist somebody breaking in their home or a tyrannical government. Imagine what our forefathers had in mind originally when they wrote the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, when they came up with those documents. They had come out from under a rule of a king where there was no means of their resistance. They had been disarmed. And so they said, we're going to live in a country where people will never have to live under that anymore. They're going to have a means of resistance, hence the Second Amendment. Now, let's talk about global governance, because this actually gets to a bigger scale. Where are all this thought process coming from? Because that's really the real goal here. You understand that liberal internationalists, globalists, the establishment, even here in the United States, they're all working towards the same goal, which is a world government. What does the United Nations, the very seat of world government, really hope to gain from the International Arms Treaty? Let's talk about that. It's all about control, control, control. At the end of the day, that's what it all boils down to. As an institution of global governance, since its inception, the United Nations founding members have dreamed of a globalized world where all nations would operate under the rule of international law. The only way for that to happen would be for them to universally disarm the planet, which would allow them to strategically position their fully armed UN peacekeeping forces around the world to, quote unquote, keep the peace. So with this in mind, the United Nations Charter, which was drafted by Alger Hiss, who was a convicted communist spy, and signed in 1945, gives the UN Security Council the responsibility of, with the help of a military staff committee, the regulation and possible disarmament of the world's weapons, hence the arms trade treaties. Now, the most pressing international threat to the U.S. Gun owners is the UN Arms Trade Treaty, the ATT. Among its most egregious provisions, really, the treaty encourages national record-keeping requirements for the end users, not just the sellers, of covered arms, including firearms, including pistols, different things, home weapons, and suggests that national governments share such records. Now, further, the ATT compels countries to make arms import and export decisions based upon a trading partner's willingness to abide by the treaty's requirements, which would isolate the United States from legitimate trade arms or force it to adopt restrictions detrimental to the Second Amendment rights. Now, Secretary of State John Kerry at the time signed the ATT on behalf of the United States clear back on September 25th, 2013. So you understand what that administration was trying to do. If this treaty would have been ratified by the U.S. Senate, the United Nations, and at that time President Barack Obama, would have accomplished their goal of bypassing the Second Amendment to implement stricter gun laws on American citizens. The United Nations does not have a Second Amendment. Why? Because it's diametrically opposed to the idea of free citizens having arms. Why? Well, because they want absolute control with no means of resistance. You understand what's going on here? So now, when you look back at, this is what the United Nations, they have a whole division, a whole arm devoted to disarmament. It's not just nuclear weapons. Look at the arms trade treaties so you can understand what's going on. And now that all filters down to, you say, well, how does that affect the United States? Well, simple. Because you have people in the United States that have bought into this world government ideology. It's been going for years. The establishment, all of these places that are the liberal internationalists, globalists, a lot of them have bought in that have got Hollywood, the movie stars and things to buy into this and to promote it because they have such a platform. And people look up to Hollywood, these movie stars, because they starred in a movie, and they say, well, hey, we'll use your platform to push our agenda. So that's why you have a lot of movie stars talking at the United Nations and being goodwill ambassadors for the United Nations, because they're pushing their agenda. There are people that actually almost worship these individuals. And they know that, well, if this person supports it, it has to be right. So people that have bought into this world governing ideology, they're pushing this. And there are people here in the United States that have absolutely bought into this, and they have given their life for it, really. Liberal internationalists, globalists, progressives, they're all for this world governing body. And so whatever the world governing edicts that go out, disarmament, that's what they push. So when you have a tragedy like happened in Las Vegas, the first thing they do is say, we need more gun control, gun control, gun control. Even though that wouldn't even solve the situation, it's not a solution, but it's an underlying agenda. And we're going to talk about the prophetic implications when we come back.
Have you signed up for your trip of a lifetime? Prophecy will come to life as you walk through Israel with Irvin Baxter. Space is limited. Our extended deadline to sign up is October 5th. Call 1-800-ENDTIME, that's 1-800-363-8463, or go to endtime.com to experience Israel as never before. Don't miss this amazing tour. Our deadline is quickly approaching. Sign up today.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter, the new book by Irvin's grandson, provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your connection to God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at End Time will help you identify areas in your life where you can be more intentional and ultimately discover your purpose. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real-life change. Pre-order for only $25.99 at endtime.com/move and get free bonus items worth over $100. Go to endtime.com/move today.
So the underlying agenda that's going on here is really disarmament of the entire world by a world governing body. Look about it. The United Nations is the seat of world government. Go to the UN website. They've got a whole arm of that devoted to disarmament. And it's not just nuclear weapons. Think about the arms trade treaties I've been talking about. So when we talk about the world government, the Bible prophesies that this world government is going to be on the earth just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. According to the Bible, this world government will be established and it will control the world politically, religiously, and economically. Now, this global government will eventually be ruled by one man, a personage referred to in Scripture as the Antichrist, the beast, the man of sin, the son of perdition. This one man, this political leader that will come out of Europe to rule this one world governing body. Revelation chapter 13 describes this coming new world order. The new world order you hear about in the news all the time is world government. Now, Revelation chapter 13 verses 1 through 8 describe the one world government. Verses 11 through 15 of the same chapter describes the global religious system and the leader of that entity. And then verses 16 through 18 describes the world economic system, or the mark of the beast, that will be used to coerce people to bow to the edicts of this world governing leader. Now, each of these globalized governing entities will be used to force every citizen on earth to pledge allegiance to the world government and its ruler, the Antichrist. And just like the United Nations platform today, the Antichrist will come into power with a plan for universal disarmament of the entire planet, all in the name of peace. But what we've got to wake up and understand look at the big picture of this thing. Don't get focused on, the thing that happened in Las Vegas. We need to pray for their families and that God would comfort them and that He would be there in their time of need and to bring them peace. The Bible says peace that passes all understanding. We need to pray for them. But we've got to look at these situations as a whole and understand why these people would call for gun control, gun control, gun control. The citizens of the world have to wake up. Let me ask you a few questions, because the Antichrist will come on a platform of peace. But let me ask you, was peace the reason that the world empires, original world empires from Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and Rome, was peace the reason that they conquered their adversaries and turned them into slaves? Absolutely not. They wanted to control them. It wasn't for peaceful reasons. No. Maybe peace is what drove Adolf Hitler. Maybe that's what he was thinking when he disarmed the Jews and led them to the gas chambers. Maybe it was all about peace. No, that's not the reason. Perhaps it was peace that motivated Mao Zedong and Joseph Stalin to kill millions of their citizens. No, it wasn't peace. It was absolute control. That's what it was all about. So is it possible that peace was behind the disarmament of England, which led to the slavery of our forefathers? Absolutely not. There's only, and this is very key, this is the reason for my whole program today. There's only one reason in history for the universal disarmament of citizens. It's absolute control with no means of resistance. Taking away everybody's guns in society will not stop gun violence. It's not the guns. If you took away everybody's guns and somebody wanted to go do one of these mass murders, they could use a car. They could probably get guns. I mean, it's not going to stop that. We've got to change our society and have a spiritual revival here. Now, I recently read a very good article by Ben Shapiro, who wrote a commentary for the CNS News. This was back on October 15th of 2015. I recently read it and because I've been doing some research on this, and he made the following statements, and this is so critical to us today, all the way in 2017, and what's going on, because we have to understand history will repeat itself if somebody doesn't take a stand. And so Ben Shapiro stated this. He said, in 2016, the 2016 Republican presidential contender at that time, Dr. Ben Carson, bore the brunt of the media's ire for his politically incorrect take on the evils of gun control. Carson wrote in his new book at that time, A Perfect Union, that through a combination of removing guns and disseminating propaganda, the Nazis were able to carry out their evil intentions with relatively little resistance. Now, remember what I said, and I want to make sure you get this, that the only reason for absolute gun control, absolute removing disarmament, is for absolute control with no means of resistance. Well, Ben Carson stated this in his book, A Perfect Union, about the Jews that were disarmed by Hitler. And he said that Hitler could pretty much do whatever he wanted to with relatively little resistance because he took all their guns away. He disarmed them. And as a result, leftists, including the activists of the Anti-Defamation League at this time, they promptly condemned Dr. Carson for the statements that he made in his book. And National Director Jonathan Greenblatt explained the notion that he was arguing with Dr. Carson, and he said the notion that Hitler's gun control policy contributed to the Holocaust is historically inaccurate. And then Nick Bauman of the Huffington Post wrote, there was some armed Jewish resistance to the power of the Nazi war machine, but it often ended in the death for the Jews involved. Well, and this is a great statement. Like Ben Shapiro, I agree that these statements are totally absurd. But pretty much everything ended in death for the Jews in World War II in Europe. You've heard the stories, how they were just pretty much led to the gas chambers, and they would go in neighborhoods and collect them, put them in boxcars, and take them out to these concentration camps. And I've been to one of these concentration camps. I've been to Breendonk. This stuff is real. A lot of people deny the Holocaust. I don't even understand that. But at the end of the day, I've been there. This stuff is real. And the Jews were slaughtered. But what would have given them, according to Ben Shapiro, what would have given them a better shot at survival? Having their guns or being completely disarmed? Think about it. Think about then and think about in America. So historically, enemies of the Jews or any other subject population, for that matter, have sought to disarm the Jews in order to carry out their designs. And this goes all the way back to the Bible, in which, if you remember the story where the Philistines banned all ironsmiths from the Jews, explicitly stating, lest the Jews make them swords or spears. Hitler knew the efficacy of gun control and effectuated it with regard to Jews throughout his regime. While guns were completely banned in Germany in 1920, the laws were liberalized in 1928 before Hitler cracked down on the Jews from 1933 to 1938. And that's when full confiscation of all the weapons, including knives, from the Jews took place, because they understood. And so Hitler knew exactly what he was doing, because why would you allow the Jews to keep their guns? They're going to resist. So he took their weapons from them. Well, the penalty for Jewish ownership of weapons, what was it? It was condemnation to a concentration camp for up to 20 years. Jews were warned that they should interpret the new ordinance and the already existing weapons law strictly. So Would Jewish weapons have helped prevent the Holocaust? Well, they certainly would have saved more Jewish lives. Jewish resistance in the name of death camps of Sobibor and Treblinka shut them down. Jewish resistance in the Warsaw Ghetto led to over 1,000 German casualties. Armed resistance is invariably a better method, according to Ben Shapiro, I'm quoting him, a better method of self-defense against tyranny than nothing. Meanwhile, in the Holy Land, the British sought to prevent Jewish weapons ownership as well, so as to prevent those uppity Jews, according to, this is Ben Shapiro again, from seizing control of pre-independence Israel. Jewish independence fighters victimized by Arab gangs and British authorities who cast a warm eye on them began manufacturing bullets underground and transporting them using milk trucks. After World War II, Jews were unlikely to surrender their weapons to supposedly friendly authorities, and they didn't. The result? A Jewish state, Israel today. Ben Shapiro, and I agree with him, guns matter. Self-defense matters. So remember, folks, at the end of the day, there's only one reason in history for the universal disarmament of citizens, and that is absolute control with no means of resistance. Now, look at what's going on again today. Over the past several years, you've had this huge upswing in violence in America. You've had these mass shootings and things like that. And what happens as a result of that? Rather than looking to the true source, which would be our society, how we live, all these different things, what we feed upon, like I talked about yesterday, there are people out there that says, hey, we want this world government, that's our agenda. So when something like this happens, immediately they'll start saying gun control, gun control, gun control, when honestly, and if you've got a normal thinking mind, you can tell that it's not the guns. I've had guns for years, but I've never even dreamed about doing something that happened Sunday night. And all of my friends, just about all of my friends have weapons, and many weapons, and we carry weapons. But at the end of the day, I don't know of any of them that's ever having that kind of a thought cross their mind. Why? Because it's not the gun. It's the individual behind that. So I wanted you to understand today what's really going on behind the push for gun control in the media today.
End of the Age is a production of End Time Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. End Time Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.